You can start.
Good evening, everyone, and good morning to our speaker. Welcome to the speaker session at Rotary Bangalore Abilities. A warm welcome to all the participants present here. We will start today's session by invoking the presence of the Lord Almighty. The speaker herself is an accomplished singer and will render the invocation. Dr. Srimani, please.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me here. I'm not an accomplished singer though, so I just sing for pleasure and some bhajans. So I hope it's okay that I chose a Krishna song rather than the usual. We usually start with a Ganesha hymn, but I will sing a Krishna song if that's okay with all of you.
Perfectly fine.
It's one of my favorite songs, so I picked that. Would you like me to have my video on, or is it okay if I leave it off while I sing?
You can keep it off, no problem.
Okay, thank you. And I can turn it on when I'm speaking later. ಆಡಿದಳು ರಾಧೆ ಆಡಿದಳು ರಾಧೆ ಆನಂದದಿಂದ ಕುಣಿದಾಡಿದಳು ರಾಧೆ ಮಾಧವನ ಮುರಳಿ ವಾದನಕ್ಕೆ ಮನಸೋತು ಮಾಧವನ ಮುರಳಿ ವಾದನಕ್ಕೆ ಮನಸೋತು ಮೈ ಮರೆತು ಇಳಿಗಿಳಿದ ನಾಟ್ಯ ಮೋಹಿನಿಯಂತೆ ಮೈ ಮರೆತು ಇಳಿಗಿಳಿದ ನಾಟ್ಯ ಮೋಹಿನಿಯಂತೆ ಆಡಿದಳು ರಾಧೆ ಆನಂದದಿಂದ ಕುಣಿದಾಡಿದಳು ರಾಧೆ ಕೊಳಲುಳಿಗೆ ಮರುಳಾದ ಗೋಪವನಿತೆಯರಲ್ಲ ಕಲಕಂಠದಿಂದ ಗಾಯನ ಮಾಡಿ ನಳಿಯೇ ರಾಧಿಕಾ ಚರಣ ಕಿಂಕಿಣಿದನಿಗೆ ಮರುಳಾಗಿ ಭೂಮಾತೆ ತನ್ನ ಭಾರವನೆಲ್ಲ ಮರೆತಿರಲು ಭೂಮಾತೆ ತನ್ನ ಭಾರವನೆಲ್ಲ ಮರೆತಿರಲು ಆಡಿದಳು ರಾಧೆ ಆನಂದದಿಂದ ಕುಣಿದಾಡಿದಳು ರಾಧೆ ತರುಳತೆಗಳೆಲ್ಲ ಸಂತಸದಿಂದ ತಲೆ ತೂಗಿ ಕುಸುಮ ಪರಿಮಳವ ದಶ ದಿಶೆಗಳಲ್ಲಿ ಹೊರಚಲ್ಲಿ ಆನಂದ ಭರಿತ ಚಂದಿರನಾಗಸತಿ ನೆರೆದು ಆನಂದ ಭರಿತ ಚಂದಿರನಾಗಸತಿ ನೆರೆದು ಅಮೃತ ಕಿರಣಗಳಿಂದ ಅಭಿಷೇಕಿಸುತ್ತಲಿರಲು ಅಮೃತ ಕಿರಣಗಳಿಂದ ಅಭಿಷೇಕಿಸುತ್ತಲಿರಲು ಆಡಿದಳು ರಾಧೆ ಆನಂದದಿಂದ ಕುಣಿದಾಡಿದಳು ರಾಧೆ ಮಾಧವನ ಮುರಳಿಯೇ ವಾದನಕ್ಕೆ ಮನಸೋತು ಮೈ ಮರೆತು ಇಡಿಗಿಳಿದ ನಾಟ್ಯ ಮೋಹಿನಿಯಂತೆ ಆಡಿದಳು ರಾಧೆ ಆಡಿದಳು 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 ರಾಧೆ.
Thank you, Dr. Srimani. That was absolutely exhilarating to hear. And it is also relevant since recently we celebrated Krishna Janmashtami
Yeah, that's what
in
I
our
thought.
country. So in our clubs, we usually celebrate birthdays and anniversaries. This week, we don't have any birthdays and anniversaries amongst our members. So let me introduce our speaker. It is an extensive document, but let me condense it to say that Dr. Srimani Chakravarti is a professor at the College of Education at the University of St. Francis in Joliet, Illinois. Her specialization is special education, and she teaches both undergraduate and postgraduate courses. Her focus and passion is on inclusion, technology, reading, universal design, cross-language barriers. She lives in Chicago, Illinois, the birthplace of Rotary, and there is also a famous school for the blind called Hadley School. It is also the grain capital of USA. She lives with a husband, in-laws, and 2 children. Her older son is in college studying neuroscience and music, while her youngest daughter is studying 11th standard. She practices yoga and meditation and describes herself as a staunch optimist. She loves to sing, gardening, and do art projects whenever she finds the time. Ladies and gentlemen, over to our speaker for the day, Dr. Srimani Chakravarti.
Just to order by our president.
Would you like to call the meeting to order before I start, Justin?
I call the meeting to order.
Yeah. Thank you, Kranti.
Thank you, ma'am. So thank you very much for that introduction, Justin. So a little bit about me. I grew up in India and mostly in Hyderabad. My father used to work there, and a little in Bombay and Bangalore. And I did my PhD in Mysore under Dr. Rama, who is a pioneer of learning disabilities in India. And then later I got married to my now husband of 25 years, and he was studying here. So I moved here 25 years ago. I taught in schools first, and then now what I do is we train teachers to teach children with disabilities. So here we have in the US, we have a lot of laws for children with disabilities and adults with disabilities. So when Priya asked me to talk, I was not sure about what would be a good topic or what should I share. I do teach the law course in here in the university, and I've been teaching here for the 15 years. I teach methods of teaching. So a little bit about general special education here. Here it's called special education. There is a lot of changes that have happened in special education in this country over the past 100 years, let's say. So, and more recently, there's more push for inclusion, full inclusion. You must have heard that, or if it is familiar to you, you must know that inclusion doesn't mean physical presence of students with disabilities in the classroom. It means that the teachers are including them in every activity or the standards. We have certain standards that the students have to reach. They have to report data on their assessment. So if you have students with disabilities in the classroom, you have to say how they are meeting the same standards as those without disabilities in your classroom. So the teachers have to gather a lot of data. They are expected to know a lot about special education and about disabilities. Okay. So before I just get started, if you don't mind just letting me know, are all of you in the Rotary Club? Anybody in education? Anybody in teaching? I just want to get an idea of who I'm talking to. Are you all familiar with this?
Currently, only I am in the teaching field. All others are in various fields. There are guests also here.
I was in the teaching field before, and one of our prior president in the teaching field, but we were teaching colleges.
Okay.
And mostly are working professionals.
Wonderful, wonderful. It's heartening to see, that level of independence that everybody is in, which, I know we have come a long way to get there, and there are people like you who have made this possible. So in the US, also, I just wanted to give a brief overview on what happened, because it might help to know the trajectory of development, just to see. I feel like India has the potential to develop farther more, and all of you know this. We have a lot of power, like the human power to human resources to be able to make changes. We also have the technology resources to make this happen. What happened in the US was just about 45 years ago or 50 years ago, even 50 years ago, we didn't have all these laws. These laws are all more recent than we realize. Earlier, they used to leave children with disabilities out of the classroom. So there were teachers who said, oh, I can't have this student in my class. They are slowing me down while I'm teaching. Or if they had a student with cerebral palsy, and if they're drooling in the class, the teacher said, I can't see his face while teaching, or things like this. Like, the kind of things that generally are, associated with people who are unfamiliar with disabilities, right? It's all a matter of getting familiar. Once you start getting familiar with someone and know somebody, you feel like, I have this experience. I understand that this is how it works. But this was totally reflective of the ignorance that the teachers had. And courts actually legally allowed these children to be left out of the school system. The school could take whoever they wanted, and they could leave students out if they didn't want them. But then the parents didn't keep quiet after this. So what happened in 1960s was, we had a law here that said all children with the Black children, the African American children who were here, they should not be left out of school. That was the moment when, right after the civil rights movement, right? So what happened was, they passed a federal law that said, that's a national law that said, you can't leave children who have brown skin, basically African Americans, out of the class. That means no segregation. That was the segregation that was being practiced. And once that law was passed, the parents of children with disabilities realized that, oh, if they are not able to leave children of a different ethnicity or skin color outside the classroom, they should not be allowed to leave my child with disability out of the classroom. So the first movement, the first court case was actually started by parents of children with disabilities, and they took it all the way to the National Supreme Court, and they fought for their rights. They said, how are you leaving my child out, because my child also is different from the rest of the children, and you are allowing somebody with a different skin color to in the classroom, so you should be allowing people with disabilities in too. This was a landmark federal case, and following this, there were other groups of parents of different disabilities who also started advocating for this. Incidentally, blindness or visual impairments and hearing impairments, there was a lot of research. You all know, it's been more than 100 years that we have knowing how to educate students or people with visual impairments and hearing impairments. Those were the ones to get attention first. But the other disabilities, like intellectual disabilities, emotional disabilities, learning disabilities, autism is fairly new, all of them got a push by this federal law. Then we had a federal law which was instituted in 1975. That is a national law which the Supreme Court passed. He said we need an education act to make sure that all children with disabilities are included and nobody is denied the education. So based on that, we now have training for all teachers. All teachers in the school building should know how to teach children with disabilities. So in the initial stages, at least till about 5th grade or till 8th grade, you have most children with disabilities being included in the general education classroom or the regular classroom that we call it. I don't like to call it regular, which means that the other classrooms are irregular, right? So we call it a general education classroom, and then they are included. So before I move on, should I slow down or is it okay? I know I have a little bit of an accent, but I hopefully have my Indian accent more than.
I think your accent is good, ma'am. Like we are able to follow very well. So yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Please interrupt me if there's something that you need clarification or if you have something to add.
Sure, ma'am. We will just collect all the question and answers, and we'll ask you at the end, so that we are not interrupting you.
No, that's okay if you need to, because sometimes the train of thought is gone. So I'm fine with asking me a question rather than assuming that it's going. Thank you. So you see the progression from exclusion. Children with disabilities were excluded from the school system, which is very, very similar to what we have around the world or even in India too. That's where it started. It started by exclusion, and slowly it moved mainly based on parents of children with disabilities and individuals, adults with disabilities, like all of you here or most of you here. And they pushed for laws, federal protection. So right now, all children with disabilities get free education from the government on their cost. They get what is called a special education, meaning that they are taught by a specially trained teacher. You need to get a license to be a special education teacher. And then they're also eligible for what is called related services. The related services refer to the services such as assistive technology, speech services, social work services, occupational therapy, physiotherapy, the school nurse. So there are 14 categories of disabilities that are recognized by the US federal law, which is called IDEA. That's similar to the rights for person with disabilities in India. In the US, it's called Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. And because of IDEA, there is a lot of funding towards special education. There is a lot of accountability requirements from schools. Schools have to report how many students with disabilities are there in the school that they have enrolled. The schools have to find these children and give them admission. So most schools here are government schools or what we call public schools. It's because the property tax of whatever we pay for this house goes to our area school. So what happens is, in a way it is advantageous, but in a way it is disadvantageous, because properties, if you have more expensive property taxes in one city, then more funding goes into those school districts. That means that school is a better quality because of the finance they receive. But overall, all teachers are expected to learn about all these 14 categories of disabilities. So, for example, we have a category of disability called deaf blindness, where we have about 10,000 people in the whole of US, I think. That's a very small number who have deaf blindness. But the federal law, it doesn't leave out even the children with minor disabilities, is what I want to tell you, that, even they are included. They have to make accommodations. And one cool thing that about this is, I was at a conference about 10 years, maybe 8 years back, in a teacher education conference, and the keynote speaker was a person who had deaf blindness. And she was studying in the Harvard Law School. I don't know if anybody has heard about her, but she gave the keynote address with 2 of her teachers, and she credited her mother for finding out her potential. She said they had to learn how to teach her to read, because they had to know how to sign to her, because she could not hear also with her blindness, right? So what they did was they used sign language, and they signed on her hands. So she could feel the sign language, and she could learn how to talk and things like that. So in the Harvard Law School, actually, when they admitted her, they were unsure on how to accommodate her needs. That's a big thing here. Here, law says that after the students with disabilities get to workplace too, they have to provide them with accommodations to be successful. So here, even in the college, we have a law that says we have to give accommodations to all of them who need it. If any of my students need a digital copy of the book or a textbook in Braille, I have to provide it by law. Okay, so it becomes the ownership is shared by everyone. In this case, this particular student at Harvard, they didn't know how to accommodate her needs, but they provided at their cost an interpreter who interprets all the lectures for the law courses by sitting next to her and signing on her hands. So on her palm, she opens up her palm and they sign on it. So this is just one example of success where, where there is a will, there is a way, right? You all are proof to that. So if the teachers will that, I'm going to learn how to do this, I'm going to learn how to teach this student who cannot learn from the traditional way that we are teaching, then we can make it happen, right? So for the past few years, 15 years, I've been stressing that on the special education teachers who come in, where they say, if you don't know how to teach something, it just means you don't know. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. You have to figure it out. You have to find out how to teach something to someone who is not learning it the conventional way, right? So one that was the law, that IDEA, it goes all the way from birth, right, from birth to 22 years. Students with disabilities in the US are eligible to be in school and till they learn employment skills. So some students, after they turn 14, there is something written into their individualized education plan, IEP. You must be all familiar with the document where you write annual goals for the student and you document if the student has met it or not. Some students, when they turn 14 and a half, by federal law, they are supposed to be trained for a vocation. So we have vocational training in high school, and if students don't meet the graduation requirements at the age of 17 or 18, they can continue to have schooling until the age of 22, totally free of cost, along with all these services, speech and any other technology services they need. So our training involves training special education teachers to be able to teach across birth to the age 22 in the schools. and across all the 14 areas of disability recognized by the IDEA. We also train general education teachers who are not special ed teachers with special education methods and special education overview of special education, because they are going to see a lot of children with disabilities in their classroom too. So we, in addition to IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Act, we have something called a Civil Rights Acts. We have Americans with Disabilities Act, which helps them with accommodations in the workplace. So which I'm sure a lot of you are availing in India too, where they have the right to not be denied a job if they are otherwise qualified to do the job, right? So if you are otherwise qualified to be, to be able to teach in a university, but you use a wheelchair, right? So they have to make accommodations to make sure that you teach in classrooms or you have a room that is accessible by wheelchair. And then there are several lawsuits that have been fought to fight for these rights. So they have these rights to be able to contest something or question why something is not done the way it is. The parents of students with disabilities also have a lot of rights, especially when they are minors, when they are below the age of 18 or they don't have the rights. The parents can contest the school and they can seek remedies where they can ask a mediation or they can ask a due process hearing officer to come and say, last year they put in these goals for my student, but he or she did not get the speech services that was put in here. So the parents have these rights too. And once a year, there is an IEP meeting with all the people involved in the child to see how the child is progressing, what needs to be given to the child to make the child successful. Other laws involve specific disabilities, like for example, we have something called the NIMAS, National Instructional Material Accessibility Standards. So this is a very cool law. I don't know if there is anything similar. So once I'm done, maybe one of you can tell me if there is something similar in India. It's called NIMAS, N-I-M-A-S. What it does is, it was passed about 10 to 15 years ago. I don't remember the exact year. Every material that is being published here, like a textbook, as we are speaking, if there is a textbook that is being published, the NIMA standards make it mandatory, it makes it compulsory for the textbook to be published in a digital format and any accessible to other formats, right? There is no way you can publish a textbook without having a digital format ready for it. So digital format will enable you to have an audio textbook by using technology, speech to text, right? And then you can download it as Braille and things like that. You can convert it to Braille. And so that is pretty cool. And by law, if a student of mine has a learning disability or a visual impairment and needs the textbook in an auditory format or a Braille format, I have to provide it to them. And there are websites that do this for the student. They provide these textbooks in that format for the student. But the emphasis here is on the teachers or on the school to make these provisions. And if the school feels that they don't have the necessary resources to accommodate the student or make the student reach the student's potential, then they are allowed to send the student to a private school, but at their own cost. They are not supposed to charge the parents for that. So they have to transport, they have to arrange for a bus to pick up the student, take him or her to the private school, bring them back, and then educate the child in the private school. So there are several multiple needs, like they call them multiple disabilities, where you may not have all the resources in the school to do it. The school finds it easier to transport them to a special school. So special schools are less here. We don't have many special schools because I told you most students, about 95 to 98% of students with disabilities attend general education school classrooms and regular schools, which belong to their neighborhood free of cost. So I think that's what I had here. We do have the civil rights, where I told you that we can't discriminate students based on a disability, and so that is more of an emphasis after they go to college or they start employment. And it's called Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act and ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. So as a result of all these laws, what happens is there is a lot of development and there is a lot of funding that is put into technological resources, right? So I think the resources wise, of course, it's an advanced country and the number of people are pretty less, but there is a lot. The difference I find is there is a lot of accountability issue when they say even if you have one student who needs it in your class, you are supposed to provide it to that one student. So I would love to hear about from you about. I think that's all I had from my end. I would be happy to share more about what I do or what I teach or anything else. So please feel free to let me know or ask any questions you have.
Thank you so much, Srimani. This is Priya speaking. In fact, it was my to having, because her mother is a good friend. Is Srimani for the past 2 years virtually, and we are very lucky to have you today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting
Am I audible
me. It's a
too?
pleasure.
Yeah, am I audible?
You're getting a little
No.
cut
In
off.
addition, I mean, yeah. Okay. No, on behalf of my entire dedicated team from Rotary Bangalore Abilities, India is fast progressing with technology for accessibility issues. And, in fact, in this very group, we have people who are working as accessibility testers. We have Pinky Gupta from IBM, and many of them are there, and many of them are tech savvies. In fact, our Arvind is also leading a Kannada Tantramsha, which is also for technology for visually challenged. And we have people who are MS, multiple sclerosis, from across various parts. So I just wanted to, cutting short my request, is there any possibilities that we can have regular workshops for both teachers and parents of children with disability? Somewhere, would it be possible for you to connect us, or since you're an Indian and you have your concern, at the same time you're living in the US, probably Rotary Bangalore Abilities can stand as a bridge between the two and improve these lifestyle and the teaching skills of teachers and of parents, so that they know how to handle these children in a much effective way.
Yeah, certainly. Certainly, I would be willing to, talk about this and possible options. Are you thinking of special education in general or specific disabilities in particular, Priya?
What we could do is, see, we have a couple of blind schools. We have schools for children with mental challenge. We have, there are special schools also, and there are, parents who are sending their children for, regular schools with inclusion. So we could probably, group them as, training for parents or training for teachers with who are into special education. So somewhere where they can get additional ideas and tips for, improving their skills in handling children like this. And in fact, we also require sponsors, because we are a very, very small club, and all of us have received services in the past, and we want to give back to the community for the betterment of persons with disability. So we all pool in funds and then we do our projects. So if you could also find people who are in the welfare, that'll also be good. I mean, it's just a small sharing of idea, that's it.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a very good idea, and I would like to help in any way I can. let's talk more about this and the possibilities. My only concern is that I am not an expert in visual impairment by any way. Since my doctoral training, I'm more of a reading person. Like I've done dyslexia and learning disabilities, and my area is literacy, teaching literacy to students who are not learning it the conventional way. But definitely, since I teach all the categories of disability, I could definitely do this. And if Rotary is involved in empowering parents, that's something I do here also. So I would definitely like to get involved, and let me think about who else I could rope into this organization, who will have a better idea or who will have more. I do know a few Indians who work as special education professors around the country, and then maybe I can reach out to them and ask if they have an expertise in also different areas. So we could have on a rotation basis, different people coming in and things like that.
That's nice. That's grateful. We are very grateful for that.
You're welcome.
Dr. Srimani, I had a question.
Sure.
This is regarding assessment. So these students, so are they given any leniency in their schoolwork so that they can get into a good college, or assessment is equally strict for such students? That was my question.
Yeah, that's a
During
very
the
good
school
question.
days.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Justin. So the answer is it's the same. It's the same assessment, but there is a very small percentage of students with multiple disabilities. If they have a severe intellectual disability or cognitive disabilities, that's when they lower the assessment. It's called modifying. Otherwise, teachers do not modify the assessment, they only accommodate. So the difference between accommodation and modification is, accommodation is basically you're reaching the same goal or the same test. You're taking the same test, you're doing it, but you're doing it in a different format. For example, accommodation is reading a book in Braille or reading a book with large font or listening to a book on the computer instead of reading it. That's an accommodation. Whereas a modification is, instead of doing 4 problems, you are allowed to do, you can do only 2. We are reducing the standard. So for a large extent, almost 95 to 98% of the students receive only accommodations. They do not, but they also receive accommodations of slower pace and slower, like smaller class sizes. So that way they are able to learn faster because they need that additional time to learn. So they're given additional time or additional instruction or tutoring to help them get there. And assessments also use these accommodations. So they may test in a different area or a different format, but as far as possible, they try to keep the same rigor for the assessment. They don't reduce the difficulty level of the assessment because they will be going to the same college as others are going. We don't have any special colleges for them. So they could be, so they hold them to the same standards.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Yeah. Is it the same in India too? Or?
Yes, they hold us to the same standard. But accommodation is still backward here.
It's good to see
that. Anybody else wants to ask questions?
Sorry, go ahead.
Srimani, I had 2 questions. This is Karthik. So one, I wanted to know about ADA coordinator. So is it required to have an ADA coordinator in, let's say, schools, colleges, and workplace? And what are the criterias? And the second question is, you are talking about the slow pace, right? Is it applicable in the workplace too? Let's say any employee should have to work on 4 cases, but someone with a disability, he is unable to resolve 4 cases. So can he talk to his manager or someone and let them know because of his disability, he is unable to work on 4 cases in a day?
Yeah, very good
This was
questions.
just an example, yeah.
Sorry, Karthik.
No, I was just telling this was just an example. Yeah.
This was just, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Very good questions. Yes, all buildings need an ADA coordinator, Americans with Disability Act coordinator. Typically, all school districts, so here school districts have about 15-20 schools in the districts, depending on how big or small the district is. They employ an ADA coordinator who monitors that there is ADA compliance in all the buildings. So ADA refers to accommodations to make sure that people with disabilities have the same access. It avoids discrimination. So basically, you cannot discriminate somebody. They say somebody cannot use the bathroom because this bathroom is not built accessibly to accommodate a wheelchair, or it doesn't have faucets that are intuitive, or you can use the tap, open the tap, and everything. So the ADA coordinator monitors compliance. You could have the federal government or the national government come and do a review of ADA compliance at any time. So every year they do like a thorough checkup to make sure that nobody is being discriminated in the class. So, for example, I had a student who had lost both his limbs in a motorcycle accident when he was 22. So he was doing his master's in education in my class. He used a wheelchair. He had a car that he used to drive and come to college. He had a car where the gears and everything was on top. He would drive himself and come to classroom. But when he took one of his classes with me, they put me in a small classroom where his wheelchair could barely get in. It was a very small class and it was a lot of people. So right on the first day of class, he went to the ADA coordinator and he told them that, you know what, if there is a fire or if we need to get out in a hurry, I won't be able to get out. And they immediately moved my classroom to a different classroom, which has more space so he can navigate his wheelchair. So he was studying to become a special education teacher. So the ADA coordinator does this at the building, and it's usually they hold many other roles. So they might be a Title IX and ADA coordinator. Title IX is about sexual discrimination in the workplace. So they might hold both the roles. They might hold the ADA coordinator role and something else, or they might be doing something else and become the ADA coordinator. So it's not like they don't appoint one person, typically smaller places.
Yeah, but they are certified, right? They are certified.
They are certified. They are certified, okay, trained, and they have to keep their training active. So if there are any changes to ADA, they have to keep their training current.
Got it. Yeah.
And then your question was very good. Is low pace applicable to work too? So what the ADA says is, if you are able to perform the job at the same capacity as that is required in the job description, then I cannot not hire you. So if I hire you, again, it's a question of modification versus accommodation. So when I hire you, I'll ask you, this job requires you to take care of 4 cases per year. Are you able to do it? So if you think you're not qualified enough, or you don't have the capacity to do it, at that time you negotiate and say, I can do 2, or I can do 2 per day. And then if it is a reasonable accommodation and you're qualified to do the job according to ADA, I can't deny you employment, right? But if I am your employer, but I need a person to do 4 because everybody else in my building is doing 4, and that is what the job requires, that is a qualification that you need to have, then it's okay for me to say that, no, I cannot hire you for this particular one, but I can hire you part-time for something else which needs only 2 cases per day, right? So there is a little ambiguity in some cases where you have to show that you are otherwise qualified to do everything that the adult without disability is able to do. So you have the degree, you have the skills, you have everything, and you accommodations to make your work successful. For example, you can do 4 cases if you are given some additional help, like, whether an assistant or someone, then they're supposed to give you that. assistant, or they're supposed to give you the technology to make sure that you're able to do what the job requires you to do. But like I told you, there's a lot of ambiguity. There are people in the workplace who have who have asked for law cases at the federal level, at the local level, where it's still a matter.
We lost you. Okay. Your voice is fading, Dr. Srimani.
Yeah, sorry, I got out of Zoom. I'm back again. Sorry about that.
Anybody else has any questions?
All right. Good evening, ma'am. This is Advocate Shreyas speaking from Bangalore. And I really love this conversation and the insight that you actually gave. So I have a follow-up question. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes,
Yeah, you are audible.
Yeah,
Thank
sure.
you.
Yeah. So, ma'am, so I have a follow-up question on the second part of the question that you actually answered for. So we were talking about the work, how it happens, and what accommodation versus the modification. So such things, does it apply even for a private entity, or it's only limited and restricted to the public? So when I mean that, for example, we have this Article 12 here, which means whatever that's under the ambit or the scope of the particular thing called a state, which is a country. So when I mean that, I cannot ask extra accommodation or extra reasonable accommodation from a private entity. My question to you is, can we ask these accommodations, or what do we call, even for that matter, asking work, does it apply for private entities and private individuals, ma'am?
Great question, Shreyas. I can see that you're interested in law. I think I don't mind having a conversation with you about the special education disability law sometime too. It fascinates me on what provisions they have here, but that's a great question. So unfortunately, it is a little ambiguous. So the wording in the law, we do have, to answer your question in a nutshell, yes. Private entities also have to comply with the non-discrimination laws, 504 and ADA, right? ADA takes, 504 applies to all public places receiving funding from the government, and then ADA applies to everyone, right? Even private places have to do it, even if they are not getting any funding from the government to install all these accommodations. But there is a clause. There is something called reasonable. It says accommodations have to be made by the workplace for that person with disability as long as it is reasonable. And nobody really knows how that word reasonable is interpreted. It is done on a case-to-case basis. So for example, if there is a building already which is not wheelchair accessible, it has 4 floors, it has no lift, right? And then you get employment in the building, and I cannot use the stairs. I need an accommodation. It's a private building. They may not have the funding to create space for a lift or add a lift to it, right? So if I get employment, yes, they can discriminate me and say, sorry, I can't hire you because you can't come to the 5th floor, right? But the building, they have to make accommodations to see I get there. But I cannot, they either move the office down, or they try to build a stairs outside the, something, like a chairlift or whatever they want to let me come in. But if they can prove that it is unreasonable for them or it is too expensive for them, I don't think they are held accountable to build or create ADA accommodation, right? So that is just one example. I could be totally wrong in that, but the reasonable clause is interpreted by courts in different ways. Largely, they are protected if you are otherwise qualified, but yes, it is a little ambiguous.
Right, ma'am. Thank you so much. And can I also be allowed to ask another question, ma'am?
Oh, absolutely.
What about sir and others? Can I go ahead?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, since we were talking about the education part, ma'am, so how about science? Like whether the persons with disability are allowed also to take up science and subjects such as that, which are more to do with oriented with applied sciences and science such as this. So what is your views on that, ma'am, please?
Yes, very much so. They're allowed to take up any, they're not barred from any vocation, let me say that. Okay. If there is a student interested in taking science and they have, let us say, multiple disabilities, they are using a wheelchair, they cannot use their hands very well to do the science experiments in the classroom, I have to figure out how to accommodate my science classroom to help them. So whether it means assigning them a partner to do their work for them, where they say, oh, can you do this? Can you pour the test tube, these contents into this? Or can you do this dissection for me? Yes, they are supposed to accommodate them while not reducing the standard. So I have to figure out as a teacher, how can I best test this person's ability to, let's say, dissect a frog when they are not able to use the forceps naturally, right? So we have a lot of scientific instruments in the lab which are adaptive. So we have forceps that are adapted to suit the motor requirements of students with disabilities and things like that. We have a lot of virtual options that they do. But at the same time, the challenge for the teacher is to keep the standard high, not reduce the standard for that student with disability. But they are never asked not to take up any, like, for example, the very example I gave you, right? Like a person who's deafblind, when Harvard Law School wasn't sure whether they could admit her because they just didn't know how to accommodate her. She was otherwise qualified. She had all the qualifications. So they are not barred from taking any vocation or any subject.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I mean, I'm a practicing advocate here in Bangalore. I work on disability laws and so on. I mean, I've just started doing that. Thank you so much for all your insights, ma'am. And
you're welcome. Thank you very much for the questions. Sorry, I cut you off.
No. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. I had a question for all of you. I heard that a couple of you are working in assistive technology. Can you just tell me what kind of technology is there in India for local language, text to speech or speech to text? For example, like if I talk in Kannada, right? Will it print? Will it the speech to text? Will it come in Kannada? Is there technology that will do that?
Yes, it is there actually. And one good news is from next month, even iOS is going to support Kannada.
Oh, wonderful.
So Android already supports Kannada.
Okay.
And on the desktop also, we have Kannada support. So Kannada assumes all South Indian languages, and Hindi and Sanskrit and other languages are also equally supported.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Is that a software or is it?
It's a software-based product.
Okay.
You can type NVDA. You can type NVDA and speech software, and you can read about that.
Okay.
Yeah. NVDA is non-visual desktop access.
Okay. Got it. Thank you. Is this available? You said all the South Indian languages and Hindi too, right?
Right.
Is there a movement to do it with all Indian languages? Do you know?
Not
Madam,
exactly.
it actually, that NVDA, it automatically switches to the language, whichever is in the screen. So it's like that, but it's a robotic voice.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
It's a robotic voice.
Robotic voice, but it will automatically speaks whatever the language is on the screen. So there is no need to change any like that. If you want to type, then we have to do the settings. So the whichever language we have to do the typing. Other than that, recently someone told in the Windows operating system itself, there is some TTS in Kannada language and all. That still I am exploring. Somebody told me already, in the Windows operating system, it is also supporting that TTS.
I see. I see.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
so you wanted basically a software from text to speech or speech to text, ma'am?
Speech to text.
Speech to text. So there's
So if I speak something like, you all use that on the phone, right? Like when you want to text somebody, you can just talk and then it translates to a text. It's not always accurate. So do you have it in Indian languages is my question.
Okay, speech to text, you mean?
Yeah, speech to text is a little dicey, but
Yeah.
text to speech is easy.
Yeah, text to speech. Yeah, text to speech. I have seen some. They even Google does it a little bit, I think.
So there's one particular app called AUDITER. I might be spelling it not correct, I believe, but I think the app is called Order or AUDER, something like that. So that's very, very accurate when it comes to English, but unfortunately, it's not very much accessible, or I would say it has its own veracities when it comes to Indian vernacular languages.
If you can find the link, you can share with us. We will give it to her.
Sure.
Shreyas.
Yeah, that will be great, Shreyas. So my dream is to see that happening in Indian languages, because it'll just change accessibility, even for all of you also. But for people with hearing impairments, like when they're not able to hear, but they can read very well. If I'm talking something and it just puts it in text, it's just so much easier to communicate, I think. And if we can do it in all Indian languages, it'll change outcomes for students who are not able to write or type or things like that.
Yeah, we have apps for that.
In Android, in Android we have many applications, but I don't know about Windows computer. But with phone, you can do it easily.
Okay, so with phone you have speech to text. I can talk Kannada and it's going to write Kannada.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
If you can share the link, Arvind, I'll share with her.
Yeah.
Any such
please.
app.
Yeah.
And even especially the scenario you mentioned, right? Interacting with someone who is hearing impaired. That particular application has also been developed. I don't remember the name, but it's there.
It's there? Okay.
Yes,
if any of you find it or know about it, I would love to know about this.
Yeah,
and
there
is there
was one person from Wipro who had done this. So
I see. Oh, that's very good. I think it's people like you who lead the way, because you know what you want and what is missing, right? I mean, if people who are sighted try to, it's like we are trying to design something for people who are using it, what the ins and outs and what is it that you're finding difficult to do, right?
Shrimani, who are working on
your voice is breaking.
Am I audible?
Now you are.
Yeah, Shrimani, you're talking to a bunch of tech savvies who are all the time working on accessibility, technology, and things like that to make life better for themselves and for others.
Wonderful, wonderful. Do you have something like a summary of what you do or anything? I would love for each of you, if possible, to send me an email on what you do or what tech is there, because
we do have a profile of Rotary Bangalore abilities. Technology is one thing. We have a regular seminar called GAD, Global Accessibility testing. So that seminar it just got over last month. But apart from that, we also have community-based projects. We have club services. We have international services projects, and occasional services. So they even one of our project is to teach mobility for next week. We are having this teaching mobility for people who have become blind in between. So things like
I
that.
see. Okay,
So
okay.
there are
People who have
people-
lost sight okay. Do you have any standards there, like the NEMA standards here, like instructional material standards, where all instructional materials have to be in a digital format?
Unfortunately not.
I think you should push for it.
Anybody else has any final thoughts?
So I had published a research paper on that actually on a particular SAGE journal, but it's still like outstanding there, like due. So
I see.
yeah.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
yeah.
Congratulations.
So I wish to take this like as in to advocate it and take this forward. But yeah, let me have a review of this particular law also, ma'am, so that makes things better. So I also hear that there's a Delhi-based NGO that's been working on this particular thing, and they've been trying to advocate the same thing through the Supreme Court and such as that.
I see. That's very good to
What was
know.
the act, ma'am, that you mentioned, NEMA?
NIMAS. If you can share your email, Shreyas, I would be happy to share some resources on
Yeah,
some
you
of.
can share it with me. I will pass it on to him. I have his
Okay,
number.
sure. Sure. Thanks, Justin. So what do you think is missing in India? Like what else see here we have based on this law, we see people with disabilities employed in all kinds of public places. Like we see children with intellectual disabilities, Down syndrome being employed in places, which we are seeing in India too, which is amazing. And you are all testimony to that. But what do you think is still needed in India to be done?
Here a lot more
Just
still needs to be done. Yeah.
Just sharing a thought. I mean, this is my small observation. People who have come out successful either as a student or as an employee, it's more out of their smartness or out of the encouragement and support given by parents or a special interest taken by teachers and well-wishers. But things are not law bound or rule bound. So the student or the PWD employee pushes themselves, they stretch themselves a little more to accommodate themselves into the setting or whatever it is, they try to adapt themselves to whatever is there.
All right.
This is my small.
Yeah, and a little more to add on to Priya. Basically, there is a lot of sensitization we need to do because when you see any PWDs who are opting for the job, even though there are a lot of options, they just go for only 4 or 5 options, and even it happens from the school level. For example, if there is one visually challenged student who is studying in one particular school, once they complete their schooling, it is only 2 or 3 colleges they opt to go for. I mean, I don't know if they're scared or they think that other colleges it's very difficult for them to accommodate. But this is the scenario right now what Bangalore, which we are seeing. Most of the visually challenged students, or it may be any disability. It's very less that we see different people with disability in different in all colleges. That is one thing. We need to bring in some sensitization, and we should tell the people that they can do any job. So in other countries, they are doing these kind of jobs, and even we can, if they are interested, even they can opt for that subjects, and and even our teaching skills we need to improve a lot. I mean, it should not be that, the student wants to study something, but we are not able to, accommodate their request. Or say that, for example, someone wants to do something in science, and they're not able to do it because, they feel there's no assistant who is given for them, or, they have a lot of restrictions, so they're not supposed to do or anything like that. So at least when you see people with visually challenged, they stick on to only a few courses. They don't go for medical, or it's very rare that nowadays people are still doing, but it's very rare that, people still go ahead, and fulfill their wishes, is what I feel. So we need to bring that sensitization in. We need to have more speakers like you to speak to the students from the early stage, and, help them out to cross all the barricades.
Right,
Uh,
right.
To add to this, I feel at the basic level, when the children start studying, they definitely need textbooks. So I really loved the point which you mentioned, that textbooks, unless and until a digital version is available, they're not published. So you have the digital version, the audio version, and the print version, everything published at the same time, maybe. But here it's not the case. I mean, you have huge gaps in such cases where the digital versions are mostly not available, or they have to be requested for uh, through organizations. I mean, there are specialized organizations or NGOs which will try to create digitalized versions, but they're not available very much in public. And another thing I was trying to say is, as Kranti already mentioned, they just try to follow in the footsteps of their predecessors. So if somebody has already done, BCom or arts, so the others would like to follow in the same lines. They're scared to pick up something which is, something different or something new, something challenging. And even if they try to, the resources are very scanty. And another point which I really loved was, you said all the teachers are trained in special education, but here most of the schools having at least even one teacher who is specialized in special education is really rare, is a rare scenario. So there's lots, actually, as Justin had mentioned, there's lots to be improved. And I think people like you are really required, to reach out, or people should be able to reach out to you and people like you to understand how much we can, improve, and how much is there to do here.
Yeah. I think this is very good, that what you told me about this. That's exactly, I was just wondering about this. That's why I chose to talk about law and the progression here, because what I feel is India has the technological resources. I think India has done this in a very different way. We have made sure that everybody is integrated in very meaningful ways, in some small ways. Okay, like because of our cultural, the humanity culture, where we feel everybody is, a person who is God has created, and they try to integrate them, and they try to give them a vocation. Like when I was going to school in Hyderabad, I used to have special schools, and all the children used to make something and sell, and there was something at a smaller level. But what happened is, we are following the same thing that happened in the history of disability in the US. There is nothing different or new or shocking about what's going on in India right now, or what is going on last 10 years. But what is important is what we are seeing in the future, what is going to come, right? And to me, I feel that we don't have to proceed at such a slow pace as US did. It took a long time. Even though the federal law was passed in 1975, do we have any issues in the classrooms? We still have issues. I have parents of students with autism coming and telling me, oh, this teacher, she called me and she said, my son is making too much noise in the class. Please take him home. This happened like, a few years back. We have a national law, but have people changed? Not really that much, right? So there are people whose attitudes don't change irrespective of all this. But what is important is we make the attempt to change their attitudes. We try to push them to think differently. We try to see what can be done using the law that we have as our support or pillar. But what in India we have that was missing in the US is the technological advancements and human resource. You, for a group, for example, right? You are considered the human resource. You are all in professional fields. You're doing things that even I was telling Priya that when she told me everything she's doing, I said, even a person without visual impairment couldn't have done everything that you have done, right? What makes it amazing is that you have the drive. And you are right. You came here because your parents, someone believed in you and you pushed yourself to come here. But with all the advancements we have in India, we have technological advancements, we have people who are pushing it. Why should we go at such a slow pace for advancement? Why can't we jump directly to where we are in the West or even move forward, right? It's an easy thing to do if we have a few people with vision like all of you, and I am willing to support in any way I can, especially knowing the law and the progression here, like Shreyas, that was really nice of you to volunteer to kind of read it. I can also put you in touch with someone, I think, from the National Federation for the Blind here, who are responsible for lobbying such laws. Here, what happens is who gets these laws up? It's people, groups like you, right? So the National Federation for the Blind pushes for laws that help people who have visual impairments. The Autism Speaks group, they get funding and they push for laws in autism. We want more speech services. We want more social work. You need to give this therapy, right? So it's the power is in us, right? People who know power is in you, like who make the difference. Yes, we have to make grassroots level difference and we are all doing it. I'm sorry if I'm preaching to the choir. You all already know this. But we also have to make some movement to get the law reinstated, unless there is something that says that no teacher can deny someone who wants to take science in the classroom, then they will find a way to do it. You know how our India is always like a top down. So my boss has to tell me something and then I'll get it done, right? In some cases, in most cases, I think.
Yes, correct.
Srimani,
So
at this point in time, sorry, I just felt like, we were overfilled with joy. At this point, I would like to also say, while on the one hand, we are all pushing ourselves to prove ourselves at the school or college that we are studying or the workplace, I should really thank Rotary. This is one organization which has picked, in fact, we have one, Mr. Zarir Bahta, who in fact started this club. And he said persons with disability should also have a club which will work in that direction. So, and here people are also chosen as leaders, and it is started, run, and managed completely by persons with disability, and they have picked and chosen this club, and it has reached greater heights now. So probably with Rotary being started at Chicago, probably somewhere that connect, if Rotary Bangalore Abilities can be connected with Rotary in the US, some connection, we can do a lot together, joining hands
Yeah, that's a good idea, Priya. Let me see if I can find someone from the Rotary Club in Chicago and see if we can get some.
Thank you.
Connect our club with any club in Chicago as a sister club. So
she herself is not, probably she has to get introduced to Rotary.
Yeah, I will get introduced, but it will be easier for me to do it from being here. Okay, my mother-in-law who used to live in Hyderabad before, I think she was an active Lions member, and she used to do things like this. She's a retired principal from India, so she lives with me now. I'm sure she would help me, figure out how she contacted the lions. But because when she came here, she tried to do the same thing with the lions. So I can find out, and I will contact them and try to do this. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, madam.
Sorry, I think I took too much time. I don't know if I went ahead.
Thank you, Shrimani, for sharing all your views today. And your message was loud and clear. Don't go from 1G, 2G, 3G, or 4G, but directly jump to 5G. That's your
Yeah, or
message.
even forward, because we are capable of doing it. We have people like you.
And I am reminded of the quote of Robert Frost, who says, I have miles to go before I sleep. And
Absolutely.
I'm also thankful for another quote that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. So today we have put the first step forward. Thank you for sharing all the resources and your time with us. We truly appreciate all the time you have spent with us. We wish you well in your future, and we sincerely thank you for presenting and showcasing the highlights of US educational system and the rights that they enjoy among the citizens there. We hope to emulate that in our country too. Thanks to you once again.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and best wishes to all of you. I would like to meet all of you in person during my next visit.
Yeah, it would be a great pleasure. So the
Thank
formal event concludes here. Yes. Yeah.
Krantige adjourn ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೆ ಹೇಳಿ meeting.
Okay.
I adjourn the meeting.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. The guests can leave. The members, please stay back.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Thank